Welcome back to Fight Capital, where we step into the ring of combat sports business. I'm your host, Ryan Rappaport. Today, I'm honored to welcome Richard Ho. Richard is a world-class coach and martial arts aficionado whose early exposure to the world of MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ignited a fiery journey of becoming a formidable competitor and a respected Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt. He's the visionary head coach and owner of the renowned H20 MMA gym and is shaping the future of fighters with his extensive knowledge and experience. He recently saw PFL champion Olivier Aubin Mercier to his second PFL championship, and I'm excited to talk with him about what has driven his coaching success. Thanks for joining me today, Coach. How are you and where are you joining from?
Thanks, Ryan. That could be the best intro I've ever had, so I appreciate that. It's really nice of you.
Oh, no, thank you.
You did some research before asking me.
Always.
That's awesome.
Oh, where are you joining from today?
I'm in Montreal. I'm in my gym, H20 MMA. It's pretty much my home. I'm here every day from early morning till the late hours of the night. I'm always here.
I've noticed, yeah, that's the only photos I see on your Instagram, so it doesn't surprise me. But yeah, I just love to touch on your journey a little bit because I know you won 2 times championships for UGC, which is not a competition that's happening anymore. But from having those championships, becoming this MMA coach who's helping usher in champions across the board, what motivated you to transition from a fighter to a coach?
Well, that's a good question. I think it could depend how far you want to go into how I got into MMA and the gym and the fight because it all kind of came at once. I think even when I was fighting and fighting professionally, I was already coaching. Uh, but before that, if you want to go back, you can almost start at the first time I popped in a VHS tape of UFC. I think it was number 2, and seeing Hoist Gracie, the small guy, which I identified and with at the time, and just dominate and take these people down and submit them at will, just like easily. Which kind of brought me back to my days of watching one of my favorite movies when I was younger, Bloodsport, just to see all these incredible like different styles from different countries and come in, and I think just watching that first UFC to see all the different styles back then. This is a little history lesson for maybe the younger folks who are at UFC 300 almost nowadays, who didn't watch and see the evolution of mixed martial arts, but it was pretty much the UFC back then. To see all these different styles, they had ninjutsu, they had sumo wrestling, karate, kickboxing, and whatnot. Then they had this thing called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which nobody knew about, and nobody knew how it would kick ass, pretty much. And it fascinated me, and I got hooked on it right away. I think just after watching, I started doing takedowns and guillotine just from watching the tape, which sparked a passion. And back then, trying to find as much information, as much training footage, and training partners. I had to recruit training partners as well, and just to get into it. Back in that day, like nowadays, there's black belts all around. I could be proud enough to say I'm a black belt now, but back then there was, I think the best was a blue belt. And took what we took what we could at the time, and just learn. A lot of it was in those early days, like self-taught, and just being sharp and watching a lot of tape and going at it. So basically, from there, had this passion, like a dream, like I think a lot of young guys, just like seeing these pros go at it and fight, and then having this dream of like, oh, maybe one day I want to do that. So I think that's what happened. I think I had this dream of competing, putting myself in there. Another movie I really liked watching was Rocky. All those Rocky series, just getting in there under the spotlights and almost fighting to the death, almost losing, and then coming back and winning. So I think a lot of us watching these films back in the day had this kind of dream of doing it. So I think once I started training, I found I was naturally good at it. Just like I picked everything up super quick, and this training with everyone in Montreal at you know different gyms, I knew I was at a certain level, so I just thought of wanting to compete and go from there. Winning the tournaments that I did. I think starting off at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments and then little underground fights back in the day, and just doing well and winning, and it just kind of like fueled me to want to compete. And then I think that was just at a crossroads of what do I want to do in terms of a livelihood as well, because there was fighting, but I did graduate university at some point, and had a communications degree. Film was into film production as well, so I was kind of in the media work. So I had the crossroads of like, oh, where do I want to go? Which I think a lot of young athletes nowadays have to figure out. Deciding like, do I go 100% into fighting, or go into another field of work as well. I do recommend with a lot of my young guys, uh, keep your options open. Definitely do both. Like I did get my university degree and had options as well, but I think the passion of mixed martial arts fueled me to get into it, to compete. And then at the same time, I think the fact that there wasn't that many people into it yet. Like I think I got into it. One of the ones I got into the early stages of mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the UFC. I think I just felt the need to like kind of spread the word and almost recruit people. Like even just as for training partners, like I wanted to meet. Once I turned pro, I was always on the lookout at any gym, and I see some like fit athletic person. I was like, hey, do you want to train? Do you know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is? Do you know what? Have you ever watched the UFC? And then kind of go from there. And I probably got some pretty good training partners back in the day from that.
Well, it's funny. UFC 2 is actually what did it for me as well. It was actually my 13th birthday, and one of my dad's friends gave me and him a tape. And he was a first degree black belt in karate. I had my black belt taekwondo at the time, and we're like, "Oh, the
Mm-hmm.
karate guys are gonna smoke them." And then you had Hoist choking everyone out, and we were like, "Oh crap!" It's funny. I think he went and took a BJJ class the next week later, and same thing for us. Bloodsport, the Quest. I don't know if you remember that one with Jean Claude Van Damme too, where you had
Mm-hmm.
all these different styles coming together, and then you were actually seeing that realized right in the UFC. So yeah, those early days are kind of what fueled me in the sport too, and it's just crazy to see what is now, right?
It's a pretty special time for us that lived that. Like before pre UFC, pre mixed martial arts is a wild time. Like uh, it was all kind of speculation, like what works, what doesn't, and you kind of have a certain idea. And like I love the idea of the UFC and having this high level of competition to see what really happens and like what martial arts do work. And of course there's evolution that's still years ago, so there is continued evolution of seeing what works and what doesn't, but it did give a foundation of what we see today in terms of mixed martial arts.
Well, that kind of segues. As a head coach, can you just tell me a little bit about your core philosophy in training fighters for MMA? Because I see you do a lot of striking. Obviously, you have your black belt and BJJ. How do you balance that striking, grappling, and overall fitness aspect?
I think again, going back to my past a little bit, I think I'm one of the few that started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for MMA. Nowadays, there's tons of schools and black belts, and they teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's a lot of just like Jiu-Jitsu competitions. I was introduced to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from a hoist, yeah, and from mixed martial arts competition. So there was always striking involved. There was always like, how do you get the takedown? You can't just like go and, uh, especially as time evolves, you can't just try and wrestle the guy. If he knows anything, he's gonna stuff you. He knows how to take down defense. He's gonna strike with you. So I think I had a passion for striking at the same time as the ground game. So I think it's just a part of your training. I think in my regular training, you would do like an hour of striking and then an hour of grappling or 2 hours of grappling. And it's pretty evident if you look at my school schedule and how I teach it. We have Muay Thai striking class at 6:40, and then at 8 o'clock there's going to be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But all of them incorporate for MMA. Like my wrestling class or my jiu-jitsu class, I do takedowns off of strikes, for example. And on the ground, uh, the submissions are it could be off someone trying to punch you, or even on top you're going to look for submissions, but like there's positions where you can strike. So the person on the bottom needs to know this. And the same for the striking. Like I'm regularly breaking down fights from this past UFC. There was Arman Sarukian against Benil Dariush. This week I was just breaking down how he set up from the 1-2 straights, went around, clinch knee, and then surprised him with the cross. So I kind of break down and have my guys practice that. I have fun breaking down fights of our guys. I think Olivier had 3 out of his last 4 fights. He finished the guy mainly with strikes, knocking him out. So I have fun breaking down our own students' fights. So it's a matter of being well-rounded, like doing it all. You can't just do one. I'd like to say anymore, but it should have been from the beginning. If you want to fight, you can't just be one-dimensional. You can't just wrestle. You can't just strike alone. You got to do it all. You got to practice. You got to put in the hours to practice both, and then find time to do them separately, and also find that time to put them together.
Fighters, whether it's training with GSP, and now Olivier Aubin Mercier. So you got his 2 ceremonial checks back up there. I saw Michael Dufour, who was at the fights as well. What's your approach to tailoring that coach for each athlete's unique strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, give a shout out to those guys, eh? Like we got those 2 checks up there of Olivier's, and I think I got Mick over here. He just won. Let me see if I can. Yeah, they're with his belt. He just won an international belt in Boston. All my guys doing great.
There's obviously each one has their own thing. With GSP, I know you've trained with him a lot. He has his like wrestling heavy, great striking too, versus like Olivier, who's maybe more of a striker, also has great wrestling. When I think of Michael too, he's obviously got great hands. Did you kind of tailor your styles to them versus their strengths and weaknesses, or is it just kind of, hey, here's what we're going to focus on?
Yeah, well, that's where you specialize in each person. Like each individual is very different. I think personality wise as well, and the way they go about things, and training wise. As a coach, I got to adapt and kind of read each athlete. And I think the great thing is about our team, I we're a real family. I put a lot of time into these guys, and talk with them and see what's going on in their heads, if they have concerns or their thoughts, and I'll give my experience. I think going back to your first question, of my fighting history and stuff. I think the fact that I did compete and kind of go through a portion of what they're going through, kind of helps me kind of relate. And so I talk to them and I kind of see their routine, and then I watch their practices. We regularly film their sparrings, and kind of see what strengths they have and what weaknesses they have. And obviously, it's almost as simple as like your strengths. Let's keep that going. Let's continue to add to that, and the errors you're making, the mistakes you're making, let's eliminate those. So I think I do a lot of studying film with the guys, and just talking to them in between rounds. And again, each fighter is different. So one person could be their fight stance is a little bit off. Their elbows are flaring. Their chin is a little bit high. Another person could be they're backing up too much. Another one could be you're just wrestling too much. You're not mixing in your striking. So each fighter definitely does have specifics. So it's hard to say one global thing, except you can't beat fundamentals, right? So I think that's what I try and give to my athletes is just make sure you're fundamentally sound. Nothing fancy, which I think a lot of young guys when they first start, they start thinking they need this fancy 20 punch combination and the fanciest leg lock or whatnot. But if you,
Flying knee.
yeah, I mean, flying
Mm.
knees are great, but you gotta have your fundamentals first. Like if you can't do everything else, then the extra doesn't work, or it's not going to work against an advanced fighter, right? So you need that foundation to have that base, and then once you have that foundation, then everything else kind of comes naturally. You know, the highlight finish will come, but you can only get that if you're fundamentally sound. And then I think Aubin, I think, is a classic example. You know, at this point in his career, like putting in, you know, together, you know, we've worked together for 15 years, and you can definitely see from the beginning, his first years to now, how much work he's put in and how fundamentally sound he is at this point in his career, at the towards the end of his career. And the finishes started to come, you know, I think because like he knew, you know, his defense was that good, his basics were that good, so you know the finishes come at that point. um you can't force that type of thing. It's just like, you know, hard work and fundamentals.
Yeah, well, he's definitely put in that work. And, you know, also something I saw recently too is those training instructionals that you were doing with GSP. And I know you've done a lot of training with him over the years as well. All that training you've done with George, are there any key insights or lessons that you've learned from him that you've integrated into your coaching?
Yeah, a lot. I could say a lot actually. He's been such a great training partner over the years. We continually to train. I think he was here just today. I think he had to go to Vegas, I think, to promote. There's I think the UFC Invitational, I think a grappling thing. But he
And they
literally
got
like,
karate
yeah,
combat too coming up, right?
yeah, yeah. But he's the type of guy. Literally, he had to go catch a plane, but he didn't miss training. He was in here hitting the pads and whatnot. So a few takeaways you can take from that is don't miss training. Consistency, like he's, no matter, we all have things, but like to make it to practice and keep training. And obviously he's, in terms of mixed martial arts and striking, like he's retired, right? But he trains as regularly as much as any pro fighter, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, we're still here. He's coming in every week, getting a few trainings in. um Repetition. I think a lot of people, again, I think I mentioned about how there's some athletes thinking they need to do like this crazy new technique all the time and whatnot. And if you're not doing that, you're not training. I'm telling you, like, I've trained with George for years, and we are doing the same techniques over and over and repeating it over and over. You know, so and it's when you have a true like champion's mindset, you're good with that. That's actually how, you know, he became so good. I think is from repetition and not being afraid of that. Of course, you know, we'll add little things here and there, and we're gonna like tweak things and learn things as well. So you always have to keep learning, but I think the main thing that you could take away is the repetition. Um, Literally being really good at a few things is better than trying to be good at like 1,000 things, right? So I think he's a great example of that. So I incorporated that into my training, like training with him and a lot of the techniques as well. He's awesome, one of the best wrestlers, MMA wrestlers. So I can't help but have that influence my own style and what I give to my fighters. A lot of my classes um, will be some techniques straight off of George, you know. So you can't get too much better than that. Um, I think the fun thing, uh, I'll relate this a little bit with Olivier and George because there are some parallels. Um, they're both great at everything, right? Like they can strike. Like George had an incredible jab, and you knew he was going to take you down, or he could take you down, and you knew it. you can't stop it. His opponents couldn't stop it, right? Olivier too, like he's a great striker. He'll jab you as well, and he'll take you down. And at some point at the end of his career, I'll say in comparison to when we first started, we were kind of trying to keep things secret a little bit more. Oh, you don't really want to like any footage of Olivier doing his takedown or his punch. But towards the end of the career, I think we just like got to a point where we're all just really relaxed, and we could have people film us, and they can see exactly what we're gonna do. But the fact that we're not just doing one thing. Let's say we got like three things, but you don't know, are you gonna do, are we gonna jab you? Are we gonna like take you down, or are we gonna kick you? And then what order are we gonna do it? And are we gonna fake one and then do the other? And George was a master of that, at like fainting and like not knowing, but you don't know. I don't know if that explains it, or if I'm explaining it well enough, but it's the idea is like you kind of know you're gonna get hit with something, and you know his technique, but you still can't stop it because he has these like combinations of the takedowns, of the strikes, and I think Olivier got to that point in his career where you think you're gonna strike with him, he'll take you down, and you think you're gonna stop the takedown, he'll strike enough just to take you down anyways. So you can't really stop it. But again, it's going back to those fundamentals of like getting the top level of your striking technique and your wrestling technique, and then just putting the two together.
That's an interesting insight, actually, because when I think about Olivier back in his UFC days, I always thought he was a wrestler because he was so good at taking people down. I mean, that was my first takeaway, which is almost surprising to hear that his striking was heavy first. And then also with George, too, I know that he was training with a lot of the Eastern European wrestlers and a lot of like Olympians. And I know that's like a big thing there as well. It's that repetition, technique, not going full balls to the wall all the time. It's out the technique and doing it over and over and over and over. And that's what breeds that excellence, right? And if you can do the basics well, you can start graduating and working your way up. And I know that like as a coach too, you're seeing obviously the basics, but are there any like developments or innovations in the MMA training that you're kind of looking forward to or that are impacting the way that you're training your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, we're watching, what's going on in the fights. Like I said, I'm in my classes, I'm breaking down fights from this past weekend, from UFC fights to PFL fights to local fights as well. So we're always looking to get up to date, and we have times where we have open mats where some other black belts will be coming in and sharing techniques. So I think you have to be open to learn from everyone and everywhere. I could say I think the biggest thing that came out of the past few years was the calf kick. If you talk to enough analysts and stuff, you didn't see that really 5-10 years ago. You didn't see any real calf kicks. I think Ben Henderson was one of the first ones to kind of do it, but the guys are doing it at a different level right now. In jiu-jitsu, there's the whole leg lock game and system, but you don't see that as much. MMA, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit harder a lot more dangerous to get down there and just do that because you get punched in the face. But you have to be up to date. There's definitely some camps where we're really focusing. We're fighting a guy that is advanced at leg locks, so we're also keeping up to date on how to defend it. For example, we're going to hide your heel and whatnot, and not expose yourself. So yeah, I think the fighters, the coaches, we gotta keep being up to date on the newest trends and whatnot, and continue to be a fan or have passion in the sport. So yeah, because you definitely don't want to be left hanging in UFC 2 days. Like like I said, as much as it was special time, but you could see the evolution of the fighters nowadays compared to back then. Unfortunately, those guys, if they competed with any of the athletes right now, wouldn't fare the same. I think we give them as much respect as possible because they're the ones who kind of paved the way for us to have this knowledge and open our minds to it. So yeah.
Yeah, well, something that you were just saying there too, it actually triggered something. Say what you want about Sean Strickland, but I think one of the reasons he did so well against Izzy was that he was checking kicks. And I was just watching Khalil Roundtree in that last fight against Kyle Dawkins, where he was, super heavy Muay Thai, like Muay Thai. So I have this feeling that Muay Thai is going to be making like the style itself. Granted, it's not great for guarding against wrestling, but those checks that you get from having a high level of Muay Thai, I think that's going to be kind of like a transition of the sport. And that's really the only way you can stop the calf kicks, right? Is checking them. And you see it so rare. Granted, like someone like a Pierre who can throw them out there lightning quick and stopping it. But once you throw up one check, people start thinking about it. And you even saw that in that fight with Izzy.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Well, again, there's like a nonstop evolution, right? So like with any new technique, there's someone who's going to come up with a new defense, and then there's going to be a counter off of that as well. So I know I think at this point it's not going to end, in terms of the evolution. So yeah, it could be a Muay Thai check, but I think we've as our team, and Olivier also had special ways of avoiding the calf kick as well, and whatnot. So we're always, coming up with something new to beat, techniques from the previous year. So yeah, it's always exciting to see.
Well, just to wrap it up, what advice would you give to any aspiring fighters who want to make it big in the MMA world today? And are there any key attributes that you're looking to see from them to think that they might succeed?
Yeah, I think don't rush things. I think I get that a lot. I train a lot of. So you see, I have my pro fighters, but I think the majority of why I'm here at the gym and able to have this is because of just like regular students, like up and comers, like people just getting introduced to the sport. And I think the mistake that a lot of young guys do is like they just want to fight right away. They want to spar hard right away. They want to compete before they're ready. So I think my advice usually is like, get your fundamentals, like do your class, get in the work, and make sure you're able to defend yourself first. I think what's great about my fighters, and just again going back to Olivier finishing his career, he's never been knocked out, he's never been finished, he's never been really hurt in any of his fights. Like, and this is like, how many fights has he had? Like 20 some odd fights, and almost a dozen in the UFC, over 10 in the PFL, undefeated, and he's never been hurt. So I think that's like a good example of like, don't go out there and just think you're tough. Oh, you fought in the street and you're just tough enough to go. Like, I think find a gym or a place where there's like a coach that really like cares about your health and your safety and your technique more than just like getting you in the cage as quickly as possible and just trying to make a name for themselves or whatnot. Like, find a place that like really cares about you and has some technique, and then go from there. So you just gotta, find a good school, find a good coach that has some of those attributes, and just train hard. And I think if you love it, if you're passionate about it, you can go as far as you want. I never set any limits on anyone. Definitely none of my athletes. They can go as far as they want. You just gotta be smart about it.
Yeah, well, that's why I always love seeing the guys who've had all those amateur fights, who are like investing their time in their amateur career before they kind of flip that switch on the pro too. And that's kind of the beauty with like the IMMAF and all those kind of organizations that are helping foster the amateur scene here. Well, Coach, thank you so much. I know it's a busy day for you on the Fridays here, and I appreciate you taking the time. It was an honor and a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to see the next crop of fighters coming up out of your camp.
Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to it as much as you are. There's a lot of great fighters coming up, and I think we had a great 2023. So I'm looking forward to the 2024 season.
Likewise, my eyes will be peeled for anyone coming from H20 MMA. And thanks again for being here.
All right, thanks.
Have a great day.